What are secrets that as an experienced ultra runner, I want to share with newer runner so that they can have a better experience? Things you wouldn't necessarily know just looking at it from the outsider's perspective, but you learn through experience. Today, I want to share these secrets with you, these secrets that will make your experience and your own adventure better in the ultra running world. Hi, Simon here. Welcome to my channel. On my channel, you can follow my adventure as I race 100 miler. We're halfway there, and of course, I've learned a lot through all of these races, and I want to share that experience so that you can have your own adventure. First, shout out to Chris Branch, who has a YouTube channel. He's an osteopath. It's about ultra running, very interesting video, and one of his video kind of sparked that kind of idea of like, okay, like as an experienced ultra runner, what do I want to share with newer runners? Things that are not necessarily so obvious. And of course, on my channel, I have a lot of topic specific tips like how to create a 50K training plan, how to deal with blisters, how to fuel. But there are things that kind of fall outside of these areas, but I think are very important or useful information. And that's what we talk about today. Secrets or things that you wouldn't necessarily talk about, but that are very helpful to know as a newer runner. A secret that is really important to know is that ultra running is about running, but not really about running. There's a lot of running, but there's a lot of walking too. And the longer you go, the more walking there will be in a race. That's very normal, and you should not be intimidated by the fact that, wow, these guys are running for 24 hours. Some people can do that, but most people, there's a fair amount of walking. You're walking the uphill, you're resting sometimes, you're sitting down at aid station, you're taking your time. And that goes into something else. Another secret is that from an outsider's perspective, it feels that the longer the race in distance, the more difficult it is. And that's not true. It's just different. First of all, of course, it depends on the course. If you have a lot of uphill, it's very technical, then a shorter race can be even harder. But there's also the trade-off usually between distance and speed. So if you're doing a 10K in like 35 minutes, wow, you know, whereas if you do 100 mile on flat in 48 hours, like which one is the hardest? And personally, I would say that the 10K is much harder with that amount of time, and it's because of the speed to distance ratio. So increasing distance is always intimidating, but sometimes it's the mindset should not be like, wow, it's gonna be so much harder, but rather the challenge that you're gonna face will be very different. If you go, for example, in the 200-mile kind of distance compared to 100 mile or 100K, the big difference will be sleep deprivation. You need to take better care of yourself. You need to be better at taking care of your feet. You'll be very exhausted. It's gonna be a mental grind, but you have the time to do these things. So if you're good at taking care of yourself, 200 mile will feel a little bit more like a multi-day hiking than running. And that's just a smart thing to do. That's what you need to do, especially when it comes to longer and longer distances. Unless you're a pro, you're gonna walk a lot. And that means that when you're training, you should train also power hiking, like walking efficiently, not just kind of strolling around, but walking with a purpose, going somewhere when you're walking, not just going slow, because this is a key component of ultra running, being efficient on trail, which means sometimes walking. Another key point, and that's part of Chris Branch's video, is that it's easier than it looks, and you can definitely do it if you have enough preparation. When I first started ultra running, or even before, I thought that ultra running is really for natural athlete, people that are very fit, people that have been running for all of their life, and it's just like the top of the top that can perform in these events. And that's really not true. You don't need to be naturally gifted. You don't need to be naturally talented to become an ultra runner. I think ultra running, something that is fantastic about it is that hard work will beat natural talent. Now, of course, we all have different bodies, we all have different genetic, and I think that yes, some people will have advantages over others. And personally, I think I am fairly lucky. I'm a slim build. I've naturally always had inclination towards cardiovascular and endurance sport. But I think really kind of natural talent will help you get there quicker. So maybe you don't need to train for as long. and your plateau in terms of speed might be better. So I don't think I'll ever be able to, even if I train a lot, to do a 12-hour 100 mile. You need to be naturally gifted for that, and you need hard work. But I think just to complete these races, complete the 50K, complete the 100 mile, if you put in the work, you will be able to reach that. And that's the difference. You might start from somewhere that is a little bit more behind in terms of fitness or in terms of your own body composition. So you will need to work harder to reach the same place, but you will be able to reach that. And I think that is something that is very attractive to the sport, is that you will take out of this experience what you've put in. If you put in the work, if you're diligent about it for months, years, you work out hard, you will get there. You will not win UTMB, you will not win Western State, but for most people, ultra running is not about pace, it's not about speed, it's not about winning. It's about winning against yourself, or more like developing, growing, becoming more fit, being able to reach further distance, being able to do these adventures. It's not about comparing to other people so much. It's about comparing how you were maybe a month ago, 6 months ago, 3 years ago, and seeing that progress and living these adventures. But whereas hard work is really important, something that is even more important, and it will become more and more obvious as you dive deeper into the rabbit hole, is that hard work is really important, but even better than hard work is smart hard work. Now, I'm not saying that smart work beats hard work, but smart work with effort, so smart and hard work, will definitely beat hard work. And sometimes hard work alone, if it's not smart, it can be counterproductive. And one of the key reasons for that, and something that I think is really important to know, but it's kind of a secret, is that injuries are pretty common when it comes to long distance running. Sure, people that don't know much about it will say, well, running so much is bad for your knees. That's not true. But what is true is that a lot of people will develop injuries. And the injuries that you see, that you will have pictures that are very spectacular, people falling down, they're bleeding everywhere, these are not the injuries that you should be really worried about. Of course, try not to fall down, try not to break your teeth, try not to bleed everywhere. But this is superficial damage, and really within a few days, you'll be all right, right? Traumatic injuries can be bad, but usually what will be really bad is, for example, a tear in your ankle from rolling your ankle. But what is more common and more problematic will be chronic injury, chronic overuse injury. And that is a thing. That is definitely a thing. And denying that injuries are common in running is kind of insane. It is extremely common, and it's especially common when people start into the sport and then just go crazy when it comes to weekly mileage. They don't take the rest, and they just run faster, longer, and don't take rest seriously, because they don't see that injuries are common and hard work is great, but you got to be smart about the effort that you're putting, which doesn't mean not working hard. It means understanding when to push, when not to push, how much weekly mileage you should have. So if you're looking for advice on how to train for your first 50K, for example, I do have a video about that, and how to build your training plan in general, so that you can progressively get fitter and fitter, go further and further, but also minimize the risk of injuries. Also, rest and recovery is so important. It's something that is not obvious, because it's much more spectacular to have crazy workout and running long distance and never taking any rest days. And that's what you'll see on social media. It's not glamorous to say, well, today I didn't run because it's my rest day. But it is the smart thing to do, and not just to prevent injury, but definitely to prevent injury. But also when it comes to fitness, you will not become stronger simply from running. What needs to happen is you have these workouts, and your body needs to build itself back and become stronger. So you will need proper nutrition, you will need rest, and you need smart training. For example, strength session, not just running all the time. You'll need speed workout, not just long distance all the time. And you'll need those long runs. So having a holistic approach that will include all of these key elements will be important. But one of these key elements is definitely rest. It's definitely recovery. It's definitely taking these things seriously. The angle of, I'm so tough, I don't need to rest. Well, biology is biology, and you can deny it as much as you want, but biology is biology, and it will catch up to you. Yes, you can get away with it most of the time. You can skip rest most of the time. You will make progress, especially at the beginning. You'll be in your honeymoon period, and that's very common. And then you'll think what Simon is saying is not necessarily true because I'm built different. What I'm saying is that you'll be fine most of the time, but then one day you will face that wall, you will get at an injury, and you will be sidelined for a very long time. Whereas you can avoid that altogether by just being a little smarter about it. The longer the distance, the less it's about physical fitness and definitely not about talent, but it's about hard work, it's about discipline, it's about consistency in training, but also about your mind game. You will struggle in ultra marathon. It will not be easy the whole way. It will not be fun even the whole way. Yeah, you will have some fun, but sometimes it's just not going to be pleasant. Sometimes it's not going to be fun for a certain amount of time. But you need to have a strong mind game to be able to push through adversity, to be able to resolve problem. And the longer the distance, the more it becomes in your head, pushing these limits, solving these problems, having the right mindset to be able to just go through that, to accept the difficulty and overcome these difficulties. And that comes with training, that comes with practice, that comes with experience, and that comes, I think, with age to some extent. I think that's part of why ultra running is an old person sport. Failure and setbacks are very normal. You're trying to do something that is incredible, something that is very difficult. Yes, it's accessible. Yes, you can reach that, but it doesn't mean it's easy. It's easier than you think, but it's not easy. And when you do something challenging, when you're pushing your limit, something that is intrinsic to that is understanding that it means that failure is a possibility. It doesn't mean you're a failure, and it doesn't mean that failure is permanent, but you might have a training block that you think is pretty good. You come on race day and this is really not your day. You struggle and you end up DNFing. That's a risk that is normal, and I think that's something that can be difficult to accept. Failure is always difficult to accept, but remembering that this is not a permanent failure, you can always come back. Remembering also that it's not necessarily about finishing the race, but also all of the progress that you've made through these months. But also even just beyond that, I talked a little bit about injuries, and when you're ramping up mileage, it's not uncommon that you will have some ailment or some minor injury, and sometimes just struggling to either find the time to train or just physically you're not able to ramp up at the pace that you were planning in your training block. And that's simply that progress is not linear. And because ultra running implies that you're altering your body, you're changing your body, it will take time, and sometimes you will have to take one step back before you can step forward again. That's why a longer training block than what would be the bare minimum is helpful, because it gives you a little bit of buffer to, if something goes wrong along that training block, you still have time to reassess the situation, rework your training plan, and get back to it. Although ultra running is an individual sport, you run, it's you. I think the sports itself, trail running, ultra running, is very much community oriented. First, of course, you potentially have your own crew, your own pacer, there are volunteers there. So it's not you alone in the forest, but you're surrounded with people. But even other runner, you will interact with them a lot, but very quickly it becomes more about an adventure that we're having together. You will bond very quickly with other people when you're running in a storm, when you're going through mountain paths, when you're facing adversity through the night and sharing so many painful miles together. And that's something that is potentially not super obvious when you look from the outside. You think ultra running, you think it's going to be painful, but it's about pushing your own limit. And all of that is true. But the community aspect is something that will bring people back and something that will really enrich your life and your experience. Also, just training more and more and more and more, there's a limit to that. And I think the longer you run and the fitter you become and the deeper you get into the ultra running world, you realize that the limitation is not exactly the energy that you have for workout, but it's time. It's very time consuming to train for an ultra marathon. It's very time consuming to run an ultra marathon. When you start your running journey, potentially a 5K is a long distance in training. So going for a 3 miles run is a very good workout. And that takes you about 30 minutes. But you go deeper and deeper, you train for a 100 miler, and now all of a sudden you have runs that are in the 20 mile, 25 miles. And Now we're not talking about 30-minute workout. We're talking about 2, 3, 4 hours workout that you need to find time for. The 3 miles that you were doing before that was a good workout, it's not a good workout anymore. It's not sufficient anymore. Sure, you can do speed work for that amount of time, but when it comes to your long run, it becomes more and more and more time consuming. People like you and I, we have normal life. We have things that are more important in our lives than purely running. And booking 10, 15 hours a week to train is very difficult. And that will quickly become your limiting factor. I can't just do strength session 3 times a week. I have to decide, am I doing a strength session today? Am I running a little longer, or do I even have time? And sure, you have to find ways to prioritize that, to find that time. But sometimes it will be difficult and you will need to make compromise in your training. It's not that you don't want to run. I mean, of course it happens sometimes, and it's not that you don't have the energy, but of course it happens sometimes. But something that will very often come back is I just don't have the time. Finally, a big secret, although this one I guess is not so secret, but we need to emphasize it. Although running, yeah, running or walking, but also eating. It's a lot about fueling and fueling properly. And the longer you go, the distance and the amount of time, the harder it gets. You definitely hear people that are getting into ultra running. They ran their first marathon, it went pretty well. They're very excited. And then you tell them, well, just make sure to practice fueling. And the typical answer is like, well, I've already done that. I've already solved that for my marathon. And that's great. You're definitely going in the right direction if already for your marathon you were thinking about fueling and you trained that. But fueling for a marathon is very easy in comparison to fueling for a 100-mile. When you pass that 12-hour mark, I mean 10 hour, 16-hour, it becomes harder and harder and harder to fuel and not be sick. It's also something that you will learn very quickly is, are you a pooper or are you a puker? But either way, at some point when you cramp down food in your body, it's gonna come out, and training will help with that. You can definitely improve that, and you don't have to shit yourself or puke all over yourself, but it will be hard because the amount of calories that you need to take per hour will be higher when you do longer distance. But also at some point you just have this fatigue, your intestinal system is just totally messed up and it becomes harder and harder, and then you need to introduce some solid food which will help with digestion, but obviously makes it a little bit harder to absorb rapidly energy as opposed to just taking straight up sugar. So practicing fueling will be very important. And eventually you will even notice that all of your best performance were when you were able to fuel properly. And another aspect to that is that when you get into ultra running and you run more and more mileage every week, your appetite will change. So if you get into running and ultra running with the goal of losing some weight, I think this is definitely something that can work, and I have a video about this. But one of the key message of that video is that running itself or ultra running itself will not be sufficient. You also need to look at what you're eating, and it's going to be a balance. The risk with running more and more and more is that you'll be hungrier and hungrier and hungrier. Your body is basically trying to compensate for all the energy that you're burning. So you need to be aware of that. And the risk is, if you get injured, which again, injuries are pretty common when it comes to running, and you have to watch out for these things. Your appetite will stay pretty high. It was matching how much you were burning because you were running a lot, but now you're not running as much, but you're eating just as much. And very quickly you can gain some weight. All right, and that's it, folks. These are the secrets that as an experienced ultra runner, I wanted to share with you so that you can have your own adventure. It's things that maybe are talked about sometimes, but not always. Hopefully these tips are helpful. I'm curious to hear in the comments below, what are things that you would want to share with newer ultra runner, things that came with wisdom or things that surprise you or have helped you in your journey. So let us know in the comments below. As always, thanks for watching. Please leave a thumbs up, share with your friends, and see you next time.